Welcome to Decision 2023, NewTV's election night results coverage. Newton's polls have now closed, and we are now awaiting the results of 6 contested races, 2 councilor-at-large seats and 4 ward councilor seats. To start off our election night coverage, I've invited City Councilor President Susan Albright and Vice President Rick Lipoff. Later on, President of the Charles River Regional Chamber, Greg Reedman, and former City Councilor Ted Hesmahan will be here to talk about the results as well as current events. But I'd also like you to join in the discussion on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram using hashtag NewTVDecision2023. We'll try to get to your questions and comments. But let's start off with the councilor seats that were contested tonight. There are 4 ward councilor seats on those ballots, and only those voters in those wards could vote for one candidate. For the Ward 2 ward councilor, we have David Mickley and Dan Gainier seeking to replace Councilor Emily Norton. For Ward 4 ward councilor seat, we have Doris Ann Sweet and Randy Block seeking to replace Chris Markowitz. For Ward 6 ward councilor seat, we have Martha Bixby and Lisa Gordon looking to replace Councilor Brenda Knoll. And for the Ward 8 ward councilor seat, incumbent Councilor Holly Ryan seeks re-election against challenger Stephen Farrell. There are 2 councilor-at-large seats contested, and voters around the city can vote for 2 of the 3 candidates. In Ward 5, incumbent councilors Andrea Jones and Deb Crossley seek re-election against challenger Raina Getz. And in Ward 6, councilor-at-large, incumbents councilors Alicia Bowman and Vicki Danberg seek re-election against challenger Alan Lobovitz. All right, let's get back to our guests here. Thank you so much for joining me, councilors. I appreciate you coming in and taking the time. First question I have for you is, this is kind of a small race. Not too many people seem to want to sign up to run for office at this particular moment in time. Not that in 2 years from now with the mayor's race and perhaps more people stepping down or maybe more people stepping up. But what do you think is the factor in people not stepping up to run for school committee, because we have no contested races there and only 6 councilor seats contested?
I think that people watch these races and they watch how nasty they can get, and I think most people don't want to get involved with that kind of a business. I really think that impacts people's thinking about running for election or not.
Do you think that this year the elections, or I should say the debates, did they get nasty to you?
I think they kind of did.
Yeah, I mean, there was a definite division when it comes to development and the schools. Those are the big issues. Mm-hmm. And things became divisive, really mirroring national politics in some ways, which I really feel is a little depressing, because the local politics, we've always had a little bit more discourse, a little bit more congeniality, a little bit more compromise on the local level. Mm-hmm. And things feel a little different this time. Not a lot of people are stepping up, but they do come to me, I'm sure you get this too, and say, I don't have the time, or I would never want to do that, but thank you for doing it. Mm-hmm. So we just need to find more people that are willing to step up and do it.
The school committee race is particularly surprising, considering how upset parents seem to have been these past year and a half mm-hmm. about the schools, and yet there's not one contested race on the school committee side.
Yeah. It's very interesting to see that not too many people are actually stepping up, but as you say, have a lot to say.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you are probably working around the clock almost in certain areas, depending on the subject matter. For instance, the village zoning is a big one. Mm-hmm. That's just one of many.
Yep.
The schools are another. But with COVID officially ending this year, the pandemic anyway, what exactly has the city council done? Like, prices have soared. Paying a lot of money for gas, for food, for construction. A lot of projects in Newton basically stopped. Can you kind of expand on that, on why some of these projects have stopped? Because it was the money?
You want to talk about that?
Sure. We, on land use, I chair land use, we approved Riverside, an incredible new neighborhood. There's also Dunstan East, which was a 40B. There's a lot of projects that just stopped because the pro forma of the development, it's what does it cost? What are the rents going to be? Does this make sense fiscally to build? And construction costs, depending on the materials, went up 30 to 70%.
Right.
And the numbers went upside down. And you can't build something if you're going to be losing money. And the basis of that is what it's going to cost. So everything stopped.
So on the other hand, the council passed, at the mayor's suggestion, before the override vote, the ability that we raise the level of your income that you can make and defer your taxes. So in recognition that people are living in Newton and having a hard time staying in their homes because of the taxes. So we raised that level so that people with higher incomes can stay in their homes and defer their taxes. So that was a little bit of a help.
A little bit, yes. I mean, it probably helped quite a few.
Yeah.
Perhaps not everyone, and you can kind of tell that in meetings that you hear from public hearing, whether in front of the city council or in front of the school committee, you can hear both of those. But what else have, like construction, what's going to happen with those places now that they've stopped?
Well,
do you just wait?
You do wait. One of them at Dunstan East, Mark Development, and it's not just the costs also, it's the institutional money that's funding these projects. They have dried up a little bit as well. And with Dunstan East, there was somebody, I think, a real cash buyer that came in, and he's going to be able to execute, and that's going to be underway. Northland had so much groundwork to do before it can come out of the ground that they continued on. And I've spoken to them, and it's a little slower, but they say they're continuing to move forward.
I understand they're going to have their splash park ready for next summer.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Without the building there?
Yeah, it would be a place for kids to play.
A place for
That'll be
someone
good.
to go to?
But yeah, it's just, there are cycles in real estate, and in our lifetime, a pandemic hasn't been one to change the cycle. It's usually other things. But this is going to be a stall, and most predict by 2025, things should come in line again and things should start moving forward. And as long as the developers and Mark Development does have staying power, it's okay. They're coming in and asking for extensions to their special permits, and they have up to 3 years for an extension, and we have been granting them.
Really, you have no choice, especially with Northland. You don't really want to leave this big massive hole at the end of Needham Street here.
No.
That wouldn't be very
Right.
good. Well, what else has the city council or the city itself been doing to help, I guess, keep things moving? Businesses have been, I guess, slowly coming back. Some have disappeared. But what has the city council been approving to help keep, I guess, the city moving?
Well, one thing I want to say about COVID that we brought in because of the pandemic, which was the virtual meetings, the ability for people to watch and participate in our meetings, public hearings, virtually. And,
Yes.
and that was something that I think we wanted to accomplish anyway before COVID, and that just pushed it along. And now so many people participate that way. And even for public hearings, they can speak that way. So that's been a boon that COVID helped bring along.
And thank you to NewTV for working with us
Yes.
to make that all happen.
Well, yes, we want to make sure that there's transparency and
Yeah.
everyone knows what's going on.
We see that a public hearing that would have 25 people in it, now combined with Zoom can have 70, because people have lives and children and dinner, and they weren't coming out, and now they can just turn on their laptop, and join in Zoom, and we're getting much more buy-in and more feedback from our constituents because of Zoom. So we'd like to keep this forever.
I was just going to ask you, is this something that's
It
going to
is.
stay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially the communication with your constituency is definitely something you want to keep.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what else has COVID, I guess, helped or not helped with the city? I know it's probably a long list, And you may not remember because I know some things from COVID, I don't. It's kind of gone.
It's a blur.
It kind of is.
I think that what happened in the schools COVID had an impact on that, and people's feelings about having their kids not be in school. And we lost so many, I think 700 kids left Newton schools and went to private school.
schools.
So we lost enrollment because of COVID. And I still think that the parent community has not recovered from that era. So that's been a tremendous impact.
The schools, for sure.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time and extra attention to our schools, and I'm very excited about our new superintendent, Anna Nolan. I've really been impressed with her, and I think that she's going to help right the ship and get things going.
Well, with the two overrides, or I should say the debt exclusion overrides that passed earlier this year, and of course the general override did not, how does that one particular override not passing affect everyone? I mean, it honestly does, because, well, Horace Mann was in there for $700,000,
Yep.
but the mayor was able to move money over to help
Right.
move that building project
Right.
along.
But the mayor had we had an interesting situation where we had a lot of free cash this year generated. I think one pot of money was $27 million, and the other one, because of the Eversource settlement, was another $26 million. And she tried very hard to create an innovative way to take one-time money and turn it into 8-year money. And 8 years being important because that's the point where the pension trust will be completely satisfied. And then suddenly a lot of money will be freed up for city services and school services. But getting to that 8-year period is going to be tough. And she had an innovative plan to try to fill that gap, but the council didn't seem to like that idea. We didn't pass it.
We both voted for that. 70% of that money over the 8 years was going to the schools, 30% to the city side. It was a creative use to spread that money out. Otherwise, she can just take it and do fields, roads, other things, which are important. But she was trying to give it to the schools, and people didn't completely understand that. It was frustrating. It was too bad.
I think this year's budget will be tough. The last 2 years have been tough, and this one will probably be even harder.
Why so?
Well, without the override, and the schools need the money, and we've got some city services that need the money. Everyone's talking about the fields need work, and the roads need work, the sidewalks need work. So you can't take it all away from the city and give it to the schools. So making both sides whole is going to be almost impossible next year.
And I'm sure that an override question will not be asked, I'm guessing.
And I'd just like to say that there have been candidates that have said publicly, she asked for an override, and then she found all this money, and we didn't lose a step. We lost a step. We were going to lose 70 some odd teachers, and we still lost 40 some odd teachers. She got creative and did some things to make the result not be so drastic, but we still were harmed by that. And it is problems moving forward because we didn't have that override. People need to remember Proposition 2.5. We only can raise our taxes 2.5% every year. With some other places that we get money, it's about 3.5% we can move forward. With the schools, 3.5%. Anything over that, we have to find it from somewhere else. And the monies that the mayor fell into her lap were after the override. It wasn't, all of a sudden that money was there. It was a case with Eversource that they walked away from 10 of the 12 years, and that $21 million became available then. Why people pointed to that money and said, she wasn't being truthful, those are the things that are frustrating,
Because it's not true.
It's
Right.
not true, and people need to have faith that that the mayor and the council, we spend a lot of time, we're doing this on behalf of everybody else. It's a representative form of government. Everybody can question, but when we tell them the way it is and they still don't believe it, that's the situation we've been in a little bit more since the pandemic.
By the way, the stalling of all those construction projects, that's another impact, because the city, one of the ways the city can get more money into our tax base is by what's called new growth, by these new projects coming along and adding to our tax base. And when they don't come along, and we've been counting on that to raise our tax base, that puts us in a difficult position as well.
New growth, we're allowed to, the new building, those taxes are allowed to be on top of the 2.5%. So when we do develop properties, there is additional tax base that allows us to stay healthy.
Yep.
So without these funds available, the schools seem to be the ones that will be hurt the most because they are the ones that get the most money. So going forward, what does this mean for the schools? Granted, we do have a reduction in students attending, but the schools need work. Teachers need to get paid, which seems to be a big contentious point right now between the Newton Teachers Association and the school committee trying to figure out negotiations on the teachers' pay. How do you think any of this stuff will work out without that override passing and, as you say, the tax base not as high?
Well, it's hard. It's hard for us to know. We have no idea how the contract will settle out. And I know the mayor would like to be able to increase the allocation by 3.5% every year. And hopefully she can do that. But that might not be enough to cover all the expenses. So it'll be a struggle.
So what about these streets? You know, I know Needham Street. I know all about Needham Street. It'll be done at some point in time, as NewTV is located on Needham Street.
It's getting there.
But other streets, lots of projects for streets, lots of bike safety requirements now too, which is great, as well as more accessibility for pedestrians. Will we be able to keep funding these types of projects too? I mean, what's going to go by the wayside or be pushed to the side with the lack of funding overall for the city? I mean, you can't stop schools, but you can't fund them completely. So, I mean, obviously there's going to be a give and take here.
Well, luckily, all that free cash that we spoke about a moment ago, some of that will go into capital projects like the streets and the sidewalks and the bike lanes and that kind of thing.
So one-time use and it'll be done.
Right.
And that's one of those things that we constantly have to explain to people. They say, why don't you take that 26 million that was available recently and give it to the schools and solve the contract. If we did that, the next year we would be in the hole that much more. One-time money cannot be used for recurring revenue where you've got salaries going up. We can predict, we know based on the contract where those costs are going. And that money to plug a hole would just create a bigger hole the next year. And people find that hard to understand. That's why she was trying to take that money and spread it out over 8 years. To take one-time money and say, we can take the interest and a piece of the principal each year and spend it down over 8, in essence, giving it to the schools over a longer period. So yes, she can take that money, she can do some work to the roads, she can do some field work. There's other things that
Some school
school one-time improvements, yeah. And there are things that will, the city will benefit. But she was trying to do it towards the schools for a longer term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what else do you guys have on your plate coming up? I mean, it's 2 years, things are kind of going a little bit more smoothly. Not quite, but kind of.
Well, I mean, this whole village center zoning that we've been working on, that's been having a few bumps in the road.
just a few. But through the MBTA communities law, you have to have something in place by the end of this year.
That's right. December 31st is
Yes,
the deadline.
that is the deadline. And I know that last night you were talking about it, and obviously you'll be talking about it again. Is there another public hearing, or is this just for?
No, the public hearing phase is over.
Okay.
That was open from all summer. It was opened in
I think
May
it
or
was
June.
I was like, yeah.
And then it went through and closed in September. So that's done. And now it's really up to the city council to hash things out. And there have been, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 or 15 amendments that are coming up on the floor, and we're having a special meeting next Wednesday to begin our work. That meeting will be 100% dedicated to working on the zoning issues.
A lot of, I mean, I've done quite a few stories on the Village Center overlay districts. I haven't read the latest in terms of amendments, but what are some of the amendments that people are bringing up that people may want to know about?
So, well, there's two that come to my mind, and one of them is the parking issue. The interesting thing about the parking is that what we really have is a market rate parking plan, so that whatever the developer wants to do in terms of one space per unit, 2 spaces per unit, half a space per unit, the developer can do that because we've set no particular requirement with every expectation that the developers will provide parking. And the odd thing about this is that the formula that the MBTA Communities Act provides for us gives us a lot more credit if we have no requirements for parking.
Okay.
Back in the day when we had up to 10,000 units, and we thought what would happen if we put 1 space per unit? That dropped down to 6,900 units. So you can see the formula heavily is towards crediting you for more units if you don't require parking.
Well, you'll obviously have the space to build those units as well, because if you take away the space for parking, then you no longer have the space to build.
So we do have some amendments coming from the floor that are going to ask for parking.
Yeah. We also have, right now, it's a special permit over 30,000 square feet of land. And there's several people who would like to bring that down to 20,000. So any lot that's larger than 20,000 would not be by right, and it would be a special permit. So there are people that think we need to be more conservative about our approach, which is what these are all about. And I'll tell you, with the parking, we have some data now. We have Trio and we have Austin Street. And interestingly, the spaces that are being used over there are slightly less than 1 space per unit.
That's what I've heard, is
Yeah.
that
Yeah, it's
the
true.
garages underneath are basically empty.
Well, half, or the owners of Trio Mark Development came in for the permission to rent their spaces because they've got half of them empty, and
Austin Street is doing the
Same thing, yeah.
So will you be able to, I mean, you have to move fairly quickly. It's already November 7th. So perhaps not just next week a dedicated meeting, but...
Well, we have, after the 15th, we have 3 more regular meetings until the end of the year. And we will take up whatever part of those meetings that we need to get it done. Yeah.
What happens if you don't get it done? I mean, by law, I think you have to, correct?
Well, I don't know what the Attorney General will do to us if we don't get it done. Well, that's to be decided.
True.
Yeah, we're trying.
And are you in favor of it overall? Do you have any problems with some of the way it's laid out in terms of not the MBTAs, but the Village Center overlay?
You know, what's interesting is that this work has been a work of compromise over the last year and a half. The version 1, there were compromises that led to version 2. There were compromises that led to version 3. Do I like everything exactly the way it is? Probably not. But I think it's a pretty good piece of work. And I think it will certainly help our villages in 2 ways. It will provide more housing for people like our kids who might want to come back here and live someday. And it will help our businesses survive because there'll be more feet on the street to shop in those village businesses.
I've read that some are afraid that the big corporations will come in and take over and do some of that stuff. And of course, if you want to join the conversation, you certainly can. Right there, hashtag NewTV Decision 2023. Feel free to join us and ask any question that you'd like.
There are people out there that don't want any development because they're scared that the mom and pop shops are going to go away. Because if you take a building down, it's going to displace for a year and a half that business, and a lot of them won't be able to come back. However, that is part of the life cycle of real estate in a community. And we had I always forget the name of it, the toy store, Henry the Bear?
No.
What's it called?
Henry Bear's Park.
Henry Bear's Park. Henry Bear's Park relocated to Austin Street. The barn relocated to Trio. It is possible to survive. Some of these businesses aren't surviving because, I mean, my kids shop on Amazon.
Right.
You know, just the technology and the way we shop is changing. You know, it's an unfortunate part of a cycle, but to say we're never going to renovate or redo any of our buildings because we don't want to displace a tenant, that's a finite thing that just can't happen. So to work with these tenants when buildings do get redeveloped, to find a place to move them that is possible, and we've shown that with those 2 stores I just mentioned.
You know, the 2 things, the Economic Development Commission, the EDC, is interested in this problem, and we're hoping that they will give it some thought and come up with some thoughts about how to help these businesses in the interim. And I know that Somerville asked for a plan, I forget who did it, might have been Harvard, but I don't remember, to help businesses survive through development. And we're looking at that plan to see if there's some things out of there that we can use.
That should be interesting. I mean, helping companies or businesses move. And do you think that having all those feet on the street will really make a difference? As you say, Amazon has kind of taken over the shopping, but
look at Newtonville. In the summer, it's alive and well, and people are eating outside and they're shopping. It's Newtonville, in that new plaza that was created. People are sitting there, and it's a meeting place for the city. It's great.
Yeah.
It's
During
made a
the
huge
pandemic,
difference.
there was probably 6 or 7 empty spaces. I think there may be 1 now.
so businesses are slowly coming back.
Absolutely.
Sure. Union Pharmacy. There's a bunch of new businesses.
I love that toy store.
Yeah.
I go in there to buy Legos.
Do you assemble those Legos yourself?
I do.
Okay.
I learned something new about you today.
So let me see. What do you think Newton will be facing for the next 2 years? You know, you've got at least 3 new councilors, maybe 4 new councilors joining the city council after tonight, or I should say after the 1st. But what do you think is going to be the priorities for the next 2 years starting in January?
Should we say it together? Budget.
Well, budget is a big one. We've talked about that a little bit, but the Zoning and Planning Committee still has a full plate of work. They've got this plan to look at the manufacturing districts in the city and see how they can be redone, especially the stuff in Nonantum. We've got electrification. Remember that 10 communities were allowed to get in and only require electrification and no gas hookups.
Right.
So if we get our MBTA communities plan approved, I think that qualifies us to be one of the 10 communities.
Okay.
So we've got all that to figure out. And there's a docket item, which I know we won't get to this term, about, there's BERDO, the building energy retro. It's what Cambridge and Boston have been doing for the big commercial buildings. So we need to develop the zoning that goes with that requirement to get them to become energy efficient.
Okay.
There's big stuff in the
codes,
horizon.
Yeah. And that's actually, don't you require that currently to be, I guess, not self-sufficient, but part of, like you said, no gas hookups? Doesn't Newton already do that
We don't
for
do
new
it
buildings?
yet. We don't do it yet.
Not
That's
yet.
coming. That's
okay.
coming.
I
Yeah.
thought for some reason I read that Newton had already signed on to that.
We signed on. We signed on, but we're not there yet until we get our plan approved.
Okay, and through the MBTA.
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm clear on.
Yep. Yep.
So what other things will Newton be working on? We've got, as we said, the roads, but there's some reconstruction of some of those roads, like in Auburndale. You're getting some changes done there with corners and streets that are kind of changing the look, I guess, the layout of the land in some way, whether that's...
We've got a lot of new construction. We've
Yes.
got 2 schools, Franklin and Countryside.
Countryside, yeah.
Horace Mann has to be finished. We've got the senior center.
Right, which I remember talking with you guys 2 years ago about New Cal, and it's still...
Yeah.
Where is that?
It was the construction costs,
Is that one of the ones
that was a
kind of-
problem, and they just rebid
They
it.
rebid it.
Okay.
I don't know if,
I'm not sure when the bids will be open, but a lot of people came and they expressed interest in bidding this time, so.
Okay.
the first time we
Hopefully.
had one bidder, didn't we?
Yeah,
One
yeah.
bidder, and that's not
That's
a
not much of a
process.
competition.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
find the right one.
That's going to be a great building.
Oh, and the Gaff Pool,
Yes,
we're
that
gonna have a new swimming
groundbreaking.
pool next summer, so.
That'll be nice.
Yeah.
And we did just pass brewery legislation in
That's
the city
right.
of Newton.
So where will they be located?
There's some spots people are looking at. There's some ideas out there. John Sisson, the economic development, he's talking to some people. I've got some ideas too. I can't wait to have a brewery in this city. It's such a great gathering spot. It's such a wonderful amenity for our community.
The ones that I've seen throughout, like there's one attached to my son's hockey rink. There's also another one that just opened up in my hometown where they've got plenty of activities outside, inside for kids as well as adults.
Yes, yes.
It's not just, it's a family affair,
That's
not
right.
just, going to the bar and having one. But
That's right. Yeah,
but it's more of a family and a fun place to be than.
absolutely.
Yeah, we have Vice President Lipoff to thank for pushing that along. That'll be a great,
That was a fun one.
yeah.
In terms of the schools, the construction for the schools, Countryside, has that taken kind of a step back in terms of planning for it? From what I understand, it's still kind of in the works.
We have site plan approval meeting on November 28th, I think it is. There'll be a public hearing.
Okay.
And the council, the Public Facilities and Finance Committee will be discussing the site plan.
Yeah, which we've taken a peek at. We've gotten a look at it. They're literally moving Countryside over, placing it where the baseball field
So
is. and-
literally moving it
Yes.
and changing the whole landscape,
Yes.
literally.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it'll be
'cause-
discussed, but this is the proposal now.
Well, that should be interesting because I remember going in there and that school needs to
Oh
be
my
brand
God.
new.
Yes, yes,
I can honestly say that.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
really does.
yeah.
Yes.
That you went to the basement.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. We were in the basement and yes, with the big oil tanks and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely needs to be brand new, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
You know, I was
Yeah.
in the Cabot, speaking of brand new, I was in the Cabot School today because I was holding a sign there, and that school is just fabulous.
Isn't it great?
Yeah,
It
it's
does.
just, and I love the fact that we have the old building still there in the
Right.
front, and everything works well together. It's one of the best things that's happened.
Now with Horseman, they got part of the money from the mayor.
Yep.
What's happening with that school? How is that one moving along? Is it in
They have,
site approval or all of their ducks in a row kind of thing? Or
it's been moving, I don't think they've done site plan approval yet, have
No,
they?
but it's moving along. We have an incredible guy at the helm, Josh Morris. He's
yes.
doing, and he keeps us informed, and everything's moving along. Some things are a little slower because of bidding processes and because of construction cost, but all the plans are moving forward. It's what we do.
Well, yes, you got to keep doing that. Let's see. Going on for some other hot topics that are out there. What other developments do you see happening within Newton? I know things are kind of at a stalemate, but what do you see coming up?
Well, this is not a development, but it's something that we're going to be talking about later in this month, and that's the replacement of the artificial turf field at Newton North with a new turf field.
And
that
currently-
will be interesting conversation.
I'm sure because the current one or the one that was done at Newton South wasn't that one. Has that been finished yet? Or
I think
know it
it's
was
finished.
Okay.
I think it's finished,
I
yeah.
think it is finished as well. That one was an interesting topic for many people. But this isn't the first time that people have complained about artificial turf, because I remember many years ago when it first became a prominent thing for people to have, or I should say schools or fields to have, was the turf. And then as years have gone on, it doesn't really last, it seems.
Well,
That's about 10 years.
We're in
Right.
the 15th year
Are
on
we in
Newton
fifth?
North.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Supposed to last 10.
It's supposed to be a 14-year life
Yeah,
maximum, and we're in
yeah.
our 15th year right now.
Yeah.
So it obviously needs to be replaced, but,
People are concerned about the chemicals in the rubber pellets.
and the heat.
And the heat and all of that. And I do know that the technology has gotten better and they've addressed some of those things, but still not to the liking of many people, with regards to the environment, with the materials and the safety. The companies are trying to make them better, but it's a debate. It's a debate. And, a lot of the fields are on very wet, low-lying areas that become useless. So you've got these trade-offs, and this is what we're dealing with. The debate and discussion, should we or shouldn't we?
And the trade-off, if you don't have a turf field, which can be used, from morning until after dark, versus if you have a grass field, it can only be used certain percentage of the time, otherwise you wear it out.
And it's useless.
And the environmental effects of having to water that grass, so it's not environmental free in terms of the grass field either. So
Pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just balancing them out.
balancing it out, yep.
Figuring out which one works. So how can we, moving on from the turf to perhaps getting more people to live in Newton, affordable housing, part of the VCOD, where do you see Newton going with more affordable housing? Obviously, if the VCOD passes, that will help. But if for some reason it's not, like, does the MBTA communities law actually put in place affordable housing, or is that a part of what Newton
So
decides?
that's Newton, that's Newton's thing. We have what's called an inclusionary zoning ordinance. And we had to fight, we and other communities in Newton that also have inclusionary zoning had to fight with the state to make that be part of our program. Because at first they said you couldn't require any affordable housing. And we said, but we've been doing it for years, we have to keep doing it. And they finally agreed and let every community do that. And so we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance with 15% of the units have to be an average of 65% of area median income. Not as low as people would like, but it's a start. And then another 5% is workforce housing. So it's up to 110% of the area median income. And when we first passed the ordinance, which I can't believe is 5 years ago, since we redid the ordinance, we built in a look-back requirement. So this coming term, we'll be looking at the inclusionary zoning ordinance to see if we could perhaps deepen the area median income or increase the percentage of units that have to be affordable. So we'll be studying that this coming term.
Yeah, somebody, an item's been docketed. Right now, we have to, that percentage is everything over 6 units.
Okay.
So if you build a 6-unit project, you don't have to give any to affordability. Anything over, that's when the percentages kick in. And somebody recently docketed that to come down to 4 units. So anything over 4 kicks in. That would do a little bit better. But the underlying land in Newton is too expensive for anybody to do 100% affordable, except if we're given a building for $1, like we were at the Armory.
Yes.
But besides that, the numbers don't work. So we do get our truly affordable units from the buildings that have more than 6 units, and we get this percentage. So some people don't want the bigger buildings, the more units, and say, why aren't you doing affordable housing? This isn't affordable. Well, we have to do more units to get those affordable. And it's a win-win when our goal here is to create more smaller units, more naturally affordable, even though they won't be, the rents will still be high. We're Newton, we're 12 minutes from Boston.
Right.
Our school system is good, and that's where those higher rents come from. But if we can do 20, 30 unit buildings where they should be near transportation in our village centers, we can get those percentages of affordable. So we can do that as well.
Is that a part of Chapter 40B? Is that Are they related in any way?
40B is 25%. They can jump over the land use committee, the city, and they do that by offering 25% affordable. So, you know, we have it was 400 units. They may have scaled it back a little, but across from Northland, there's a 40B right there that I think just passed or is going to. And that's 400 units. Did you know about it?
No.
Yeah, and so 25% of 400 units are
That's,
going, it's substantial. They're
that
going to
is-
be under
yes.
the affordable program. So a lot of people don't like the 40Bs because we have no control. If they go to the ZBA, it's through the state, and we don't have a vote. But that does create affordable units.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to say a word about the rents, that people complain about the rents in Trio and Austin Street. They have to understand that their market rate units subsidize the affordable units.
Right.
I mean, these people are, the people who develop these buildings are, they're not, it's not a charity case, that's their
Right.
business, that's their income. And so that's how it works. The market rate units subsidize the affordables. And so sometimes that does push up the rent on the regular units.
And the developer is the one who decides what the rent is.
Yeah.
The market decides.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
You know, the rents. You know, you can't just ask anything. You know, we have a free market, real estate market, and you know, rents are high, and people don't believe it. But if you create more units, you create more competition, it can stabilize rents from continuing. But it's not just Newton. You read about it. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So tonight's election night, obviously. You've got possibly 4 new councilors coming on. What's the plan on day one?
Oh,
Like-
well.
Welcome with open arms.
Welcome with open arms, but our clerk is already, Carol Moore, has already started to think about orientation for the new counselors. And
Do
all-
they start before January 1st, or do they start January 1st with the orientation?
they will start before
Before,
January 1st, yeah, because then the law department does work, and they talk about the land use process and how that's involved.
There's a
and
lot to learn.
Other departments participate in training the new counselors, and of course, the clerk's office gets involved. So
Right.
there'll be a lot of orientation and training, learning how to be a counselor.
It takes it takes a full term
It
before
does.
you really get your feet under you and understand. There's Robert's rules. There's a lot of laws and things that they need to understand, and it takes a good term to really get your feet under you.
It's an awful lot of work that you guys put in, so we thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
As president, how has that been for you? I mean, when I met you, when I first started here on NewTV, you were not president of the
No,
city council.
no.
But how has that been for you? You must have learned a lot, for one.
I have learned a lot, and it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. A lot more hours than I thought it was going to be, with the phone ringing constantly, with this issue or that issue. So yeah, it's been a learning experience for me, and it's been you know, it's been very worthwhile. A couple of things that I feel good about is that we're just about to release a new database, a docket tracking database, which will allow us and citizens and anybody to search and see what docket items did Vice President Lipoff docket, how did they make it through the system, who voted for them, who voted against them. It's an amazing search engine, and it's got everything from this term in it now already, so it'll be released with stuff in it.
When is that coming?
I'm hoping that it's functioning now. I'm hoping that we will start using it to upload our new docket items in the new term.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we'll be
that's-
looking for that in the new term?
That's been you know, an every Thursday piece of work for the whole 2 years. Yeah.
And as vice president, how has it been going for you?
It's been going great because I enjoy working with Susan. I think we've had some fun doing this, and we also lived through the pandemic together, which was very stressful. Having meetings with the executive branch and trying to figure things out that none of us had ever been through, and there was definitely a bonding through that process. and probably a little bit closer in the weeds for us during the pandemic with the executive branch. It's always a close relationship, but there was so much going on then. So it's been interesting, and I've enjoyed working with the president.
We've had a good working relationship.
Yeah,
That makes it much more fun as well as easier and
absolutely.
I guess relatable, because you can understand each other and then express that out
Yeah.
and help others understand what's going on in the city council.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you'd like to add before?
I have to say one more thing
Of course.
for everybody to look forward to, and that is our ordinances are all in PDFs, and they are not searchable. It's terrible.
I can agree.
And the clerk and I had been working all term. We've interviewed 5 companies, and I think she's selected one of them. And over the course of this next year, we will be moving all of our ordinances into this database. We'll be coming into the 21st century.
Yeah.
And it's like most other cities and towns have it that way now.
Okay.
So.
And on that note, there were positions that weren't filled in the last year or so when the new clerk came in, and they're all filled now.
Yep.
And the clerk's office is working smoothly, which is something that we're happy and proud about
Absolutely.
getting done.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much for coming. I appreciate you coming in and telling the citizens what's going on out there in Newton, and I'm sure they know some of it, but perhaps not all, so you may have enlightened a few. I know I learned something tonight myself. I know that you like Legos. But we'll be right back with our next guests. Today, Newton News' intern, Owen Bynum, went to different polling locations throughout the city to ask residents what they think are the biggest issues Newton is facing.
It's voting day here in the city of Newton. I'm going around asking residents what are some of the problems and issues that the city is currently facing.
You know, I think we've had a number of city councilors in for a number of years, and maybe it's time for some new folks to come in. I'm very concerned about the zoning proposals that have come out of zoning and planning. I'm an architect myself, and I'm not seeing the kind of process that would allow us to be very confident that we've come to a consensus on this issue, and that we have a good zoning that would match that consensus.
Every community, on the earth is facing climate crisis. And we've been doing a lot of great work in the last 2 years on improving our energy codes and reducing our greenhouse gases. And lastly, one that's really near and dear to my heart is making our community more walkable and bikeable, putting in more things like this that you see right here, this RRFB, which is a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, makes it safer for pedestrians, but also moving forward on bike infrastructure and safer sidewalks.
I think overnight parking seems to be a pretty hot issue these days, and it could be solved by, banning that practice of, prohibiting overnight parking.
It looks like our schools are a little bit in a slight decline. I heard that the academic rigor is a little bit down. So I think that's a major issue that's facing the community. I think it's really important to focus on the future, and I think education is a huge, huge component, especially as a Newton resident with small children. So, obviously there's current issues that affect us, but that's something that we can't overlook.
There are many, but the two are housing and our village center zoning plan that is intended to address our housing need and add more diverse housing opportunity into our village centers and immediately surrounding neighborhoods, and our schools. Our schools are suffering a lack of resources, and we were not able to pass an override this past spring, which hurt our ability to provide enough teachers and enough support services for our students. And we must find a way to bring more revenue into our schools. These two things are interconnected in that our housing crisis is preventing a next generation from getting a foothold in Newton, which is really critical both in terms of filling our schools, which are seeing depleted enrollments steadily over the last 5 years, and you know, teachers can't afford to live here. 11% of our city workers live actually in Newton. 89% scattering to the winds, and it's because the housing prices are so precious here. So we've got to do something about this. We need a next generation of civic leaders to take over our community as well.
I think the biggest issue in this election is the question of the zoning and development. And I think the way to fix it is to stop listening to what developers whose only interest is profit have to say and figure out how to fix the housing shortage without enriching a handful of already wealthy developers.
Welcome back to New TV's Decision 2023. Joining me now in the studio is former City Councilor Ted Hesmahan and President of the Charles River Regional Chamber, Greg Reedman. Thank you both for joining us tonight. It's great to have you.
Great to be here, Jen.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking.
You guys are great to come in and do this.
Yeah.
I think this is what, second, third year, or third time? Something like that.
We're going
at
to go
least.
on tour.
Oh, good, good. So tell me, what did you think of this year's municipal election? To me, the lack of, I guess, contested races really stands out. Ted?
Well, yeah, you're right. No, it was especially disappointing seeing that the school committee election is totally uncontested because I know I'm not as involved as I used to be, but boy, I heard plenty from people who are dissatisfied with one thing or another that's going on in the schools. The funding isn't there. Teachers are getting downsized and all sorts of other things, programs getting ended. Same thing every single year, but this year, for whatever reason, nobody stepped up. And I think Paul Levy even came back. I thought he was going to retire, but he came back for another year, maybe because there was no one else to run. But it's disappointing. I did hear earlier that Susan Albright said it was possibly because it's really mean out there. I mean, I think a lot of people just are not wanting to put themselves forward, particularly if it's their first run. I like, the confrontation and the give and take, but not everybody is built that way.
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, so I would say, given the unhappiness with the schools, it's stunning that there are no contested school races, or and just how important it is. This is the thing we pride ourselves in Newton about, is the quality of our school systems, but nobody ran, which meant that there wasn't a single debate about any school
Anything
issue.
in the schools, yeah.
I'll shift to the municipal one. I have my prediction of who loses tonight. Right? I mean, I know the loser in this election is any issue that wasn't about zoning or development.
Right.
Because in these 6 contested races, there was nothing else that anyone cared about. I don't think the voters made any decision because this candidate's going to really help me with my snow plowing concerns or my trash removal concerns or the environmental issues that are plaguing our city and our nation. There wasn't a single issue that any candidate was separated by, and you could see that by driving around the lawn signs. There was never a candidate who was with another group of candidates. It was this group of candidates or this group of candidates, and it was only one issue that mattered. And that means we all lost an opportunity to talk about all the other issues that this city cares about, needs to care about, the big problems we have, from financing the retirement system to the schools to street maintenance to, like I said, electrification and some of the issues that are facing the future of our planet in terms of climate and the city's response to that. Not a single one of them was ever an issue for anybody. So we didn't learn anything about these candidates. We don't know if we have different candidates coming to us. We don't know where they stand on these things or what they're going to be about. Because there was no discussion about it.
Well, and they have to, meaning the city council has to decide by the end of this year. So anyone that's
Right.
new actually won't get to vote in terms
Sure,
of
I mean on the zoning. But
the zoning. Granted,
so-
there will be other things.
Yes,
obviously.
but even that, so will they try to undo things or whatever? But yes, they were basically this decision, the voters are deciding on a council that isn't going to actually make the decision that people were most engaged in and worried about. And it's a huge issue and it's a huge opportunity, but every other issue falls by the wayside, and that's terrible.
I mean, for this year, by the end of this year, they have to vote on the MBTA Communities Act.
Right.
but there's still the village center overlay districts.
Right.
And there's a lot of other stuff having to do with zoning. And, you know, I looked through all the candidates in the contested races, and, you know, it was a pretty clear divide. And so you can sort of tell where people are going to be come next year when they start talking about, you know, tweaking the design, looking at the village centers and, you know, raising building heights or increasing density and so forth. So it'll be, it's going to be an interesting election, but you know, you're absolutely right. The main issue I think that got a lot of people involved with this was the MBTA Communities Act, and that it was going to add over 8,000 units. Well, the ability to build
Right.
over 8,000 units. They're not all going to get built. In fact, right now, if you look around, there's a lot of projects that are stalled.
Right.
You know,
We were talking about earlier with
yeah, I mean,
Susan
Dunston
and-
East is right, you know, close to me, and that was going to be over 300 units, I think, and that hasn't gotten off the ground yet. Hopefully, the Armory project, which will be 100% affordable housing, primarily for lower income individuals and households.
Has that one started yet?
No, well,
That one stalled as well?
Yeah, it's going to take a little while.
Is that because of the construction costs that are up?
Construction costs, lending costs, interest rates are up. You know, just about everything. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who has done affordable housing, you know, for 40, 45 years, and you know, it's really tough out there now. First of all, you have to go through all of the permitting, which is one of the things about the MBTA Communities Act and about reducing it from 2/3 to a mere majority to pass zoning in order to make it easier to develop. But it's still going to be really tough. And you know, Newton isn't alone in this. Boston, you know, there's a lot of opposition to every project that comes down the pike. Not literally, but figuratively. And also the ones that come down the pike.
Right, yes, there are there.
Yeah, that's something that I think folks who've been really worried about what this village center zoning don't quite get is that it's going to be so gradual by virtue of Massachusetts has the shortage of construction workers in the nation. Interest rates are through the roof. You can't get money, you can't get loans even if you want to, and if you're willing to pay.
Can't afford them.
You can't afford it, but it's also, there's still construction delays. So even if this thing passes, I think there are people who worry it's going to pass on a Monday and on Tuesday you're going to see everything get bulldozed down and start building. It's just not going to happen that way. It's going to be months, actually years and years before you see the kind of changes that those who support it are hoping for.
We do have some numbers, and we'll have those graphics up for you in a minute, but I'll let you two take a quick look. If you just want to hit that.
Oh, yeah,
right
okay,
there.
sure.
We'll have those numbers for you. But
I almost touched the screen. That would have been bad.
used to the iPad. But what other issues is Newton facing right now? Or I should say from COVID, because, you know, COVID officially ended, the pandemic officially ended, you know, this year in May. Granted, a lot of people went back to work, back to school, but the lingering effects are still here.
Oh, yeah.
What do you see? I mean, you're part of the affordable housing. What do you see?
Well, I mean, the impact of COVID, and I think primarily COVID hasn't had so much of an impact on developing affordable housing. Where I see it, I have a familial interest in the fact that my wife is a public school teacher. And I think a big concern for teachers as well as for parents, obviously, is that, you know, during COVID with kids learning remotely or in hybrid situations or with all the other restrictions that were put on, is that they're behind where they would have otherwise been. And you know, I remember when my wife was teaching from home remotely with a classroom full of kids that she didn't actually see in person. And you know, the way she described it was sort of like learning to fly an airplane while building an airplane while designing an airplane. And it was really, really tough to get it all set up. I commend teachers who were able to do it, who, you know, did the best that they could with kids. But I know from, you know, speaking to my friends, my kids are all graduated and out of school for a few years. But for my friends who still have kids in high school and also in middle school, you know, their kids are behind where they otherwise would have been. And of course, parents are always concerned about, you know, what the impact's going to be about getting into college or, you know, getting into, you know, other sort of activities, getting a job, all those sort of things. And I don't think that's going to go away for a while.
The lingering effect still for
I
a
think
couple
it
more?
is, yeah, because
couple more years, maybe?
Well, you look at some of the standardized tests, and and it depends on who you believe on this stuff. But I'm willing to accept that for on average, kids are up to a year or more behind where they otherwise would have been if COVID hadn't happened.
Yes, I can see some of the effects happening for the kids. I have one who was affected by it, so yes, I can see clearly they're slightly behind. But they also, I don't know, kind of made it work. We'll see how well they made it work, I guess, later on, but made it fit their schedule and kind of, I guess, kept it going. And are not used to going to school full time again. So that was the big one. For businesses, though, how did it affect?
Well, so our businesses continue to struggle to rebound for all the obvious reasons, but the labor supply is still a problem. It's still hard to get people in a lot of the small businesses and jobs, and it's still, inflation has made it really difficult. And again, going back to the idea of interest rates. So if you have a restaurant and your stove breaks and you need a loan, good luck trying to get somebody to loan you money, or your air heating and ventilation system breaks in your small office building. All these things are really, really difficult for people, and they continue to be a problem for people. So,
and the lack of affordable housing comes in here because at a time when you're looking for people to work at jobs, if you have a restaurant, if you want somebody to come in, they're driving from quite a distance. Either they're coming from Boston or they're coming from farther out, and that affects who you're going to get to work there. And I know so many places that have cut back on their hours, or they're not open as often as they used to be, or they've completely closed down.
And that's so it's the capital A affordable, but it's also any kind of housing, which is what the upside for village center zoning is. It creates a lot more housing for our employers, for employees who are, whether they're hourly wage workers or whatever. Those units, those apartments, even if they're not legally, technically affordable, capital A affordable, they're going to be more affordable than the single family homes in our city. So an apartment above a small storefront, a small building, apartment building, is going to be less expensive. And that is really one of the reasons why the affordable housing component, or the village center thing, really is important to small businesses and large businesses.
And I think there's such a huge irony with all the Save the Village signs that I see around town. Those are generally people who don't want increased density. They don't want increased height on buildings.
They don't want change.
They don't want change. Yeah, change is bad. So ironically, that's going to kill the villages, because you won't be able to get businesses to come in to rent space. It's hard enough to rent space.
Right.
You know more about the rental market right now for both commercial and residential, the same thing. But it's if we don't have enough housing to create the foot traffic and local traffic to get people to come to your business, to your restaurant, grocery store, whatever, and people can't afford to live close to their jobs, the village center is going to die. And people love these quaint little villages, but they're going to go away. I mean, I see it in West Newton right now. We've got a lot of empty storefronts, and we go through cycles with that.
Right, I've seen it.
As long as I've lived, the last 30 years that I've lived in Newton, you see that. There's cycles with, and you have a longtime tenant who'll move out. But right now, I mean, I'm sensing from talking to some of the people that own stores or businesses in the village centers that they're really worried about the future. Are they going to get enough people to come in just to keep open?
Right.
And if they're starting a new business, that's a huge risk.
Right. Especially right now, because who knows where it's going at the moment.
So Jen, I'm noticing we see some numbers, and I actually did a little math beforehand there.
Oh yeah? What do you have?
I didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
No. So people think, and this election has been about village center zoning and housing. What it's really about is who gets to be city council president.
Yeah.
So yeah, right now we do have some numbers. Looks like David Mickley is winning over Dan Gainey right now with almost 70% of the vote, 646 votes over 280. I'm not sure if all of them are in yet, the 4 different ones. For Ward 4, we have Randy Block leading over Dorsan Sweet, 64.3% over 35.7%. Let's see, we've got for Ward 8, Stephen Farrell leading over incumbent Holly Ryan, 64.4% over 35.6%. I'm not sure if all of those numbers are in yet, but we're getting there.
That's one precinct in Ward.
Here is the
Yeah.
Ward 5 at large. We've got Raina Getz right now at 36.7%, leading over Andrea Downs at 33% over Deb Crossley at 30.2%. So I'm guessing that's a citywide one, so that one's not quite done yet. And at the large for Ward 6, we have Alan Lubovitz with 37% over Vicky Danberg at 31.9%, over Alicia Bowman at 31.1%. So what do you think of those numbers at the moment? Kind of,
It's pretty stunning for the majority that's currently in charge of the city council. So let me try to explain that if I can.
Certainly.
So right now, if you look at the way, and let's say on zoning or these things, it's basically a 15-9 split on the city council, right?
Right.
It's 15. Let's call them the pro zoning people. Rather than using that, let's call them Team Albright. Team
Okay.
Albright has 15 of the 24 votes. And Team Laredo, only I'm saying him because he tends to be on the other side of it, and he was the previous city council president. So Team Laredo has 9, so 15 and 9, right? This election, there are 6 seats that are up for grabs that could change, that could flip one way. If Team Albright loses 4, then Team Laredo would prevail and then have the majority. We would probably see a different city council president, and a very much different, because the city council president appoints the committee chairs and really sets the agenda for what it is. So if Team Albright loses 4 seats, Team Laredo would come out ahead. Conversely, Team Laredo could lose 3, and Team Albright would then prevail and continue to be the majority. Right now, what we're seeing is that Team Laredo has just made some pretty significant gains, including in wards.
Both the at-large and one of the.
Right. So there could really be a dramatic change in terms of the city council and the leadership and who's in charge if these results, and they're only partly in, but they're pretty dramatic, continue.
What do you think that will do for the overall, I guess, voting for, let's say, the Village Center?
Well, so the
overlay?
Village Center zoning proposal is going to go forward with this current city council, and it looks like it's going to pass. But it really does look like the Village Center zoning will then be challenged in a referendum, much like Northland was challenged several years ago by a ballot referendum. And then what happens if there's a referendum? Who knows? Or will this new city council, if the new city council is dramatically different, will they try to make changes to the zoning proposal, regardless of what a referendum does? So. It's pretty dramatic in terms of what might happen in the shift that we may be facing in the city, in terms of who's in charge and who leads it and who is the new. I mean, whether it is Susan Albright or one of her, like-minded people, or Mark Laredo, one of his like-minded people, is almost beside the point. It really is this. There's a shift there, and it looks at this moment like Team Laredo is ahead.
I'm going to be a little more cautious. I never predict anything, particularly when it involves the future. You're looking at a lot of wards and precincts where there are absolutely no returns yet.
Right.
And I know, the ones where the folks who are more, let's call them Team Albright, where they do well is in parts of Ward 5. Got nothing from Ward 5 yet. Ward 6, nothing from Ward 6 yet. 1, 2, yeah. I don't see anything coming in from Ward 6 yet. And we've only got half the results from Wards 2 and, well, no, only a quarter of the results from Ward 2, half the results from Ward 3. So it's still early days, but if the trends keep up.
The ward races are the real bellwether because there's 4 of them.
Yeah.
There's 4.
It looks like all of Ward 7 is in, because there are.
And Lyle Baker won again, big surprise.
I believe he was uncontested, so.
Well, that would,
I think he's still there.
He still goes out and campaigns, I'll tell
It's
you.
true.
I like Lyle, he's a friend, so I'm just gently teasing.
You could, well, yes, you were on the city council
Right.
long
So
enough.
with the ward races, we, if you want to look at it that way, so
The
in
ward-only races,
in
yes.
Ward 2, it was, Emily Norton, you would say, and again, this is a hypothetical way of just trying to describe, is Team Laredo, and it might be that it stays Team Laredo. In Ward 5, it was Team Albright. That one looks like it might flip the other way. Who knows? We haven't seen the Ward 5, Ward 6 results yet, but who knows there? That's the one up there. And then in Ward 8, it does look very much like it was Chris Markowitz, which would be a Team Laredo vote, replaced by another Team Laredo vote. And then the one with Holly Ryan is more of Holly Ryan would have leaned towards Team Albright. So that's one where you could see a flip. So that, the flips are the key there,
It's interesting
Yep.
that you've provided this analysis.
There
That
you
was
go.
pretty good.
Well, actually, in the Ward 2 councilor race, just the ward race, the two candidates there, Dan Gaynor and David Mickley,
Yeah.
are actually pretty close on most of the issues.
That's what I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Gaynor, I think, is a little bit more progressive, particularly, on the issues around development and affordable housing. But, hard to predict which way that they're going to go. It's going to be different from when Emily Norton was there.
Yes.
That's the one sure change. When they had the primary or preliminary election, the candidate who was most aligned with Save the Villages was knocked out of that race. So you got people who were a little bit closer.
And
to
I
that
think
race.
in Ward 8's that way too. Chris Markowitz was pretty moderate generally, and didn't rock the boat too much, right? But we have two candidates that are very much on the opposite ends of the spectrum, who would be much more vigilant about their perspective, especially on development and housing, right? So Randy Block, who was part of Right Size Newton, and Doris Hansweet, who's part of Engine 6. That really is the two extreme sides of development debate that we've had over these last few years, battling it out. So,
What do you think the biggest factor for voters? You mentioned, the village centers, but for them, what do you think?
So it's hard to imagine it was anything else. Because when it's a local election and turnout is low, but again, I'll go back to the lawn signs. The lawn signs were Team Laredo or Team Save Our Villages and Team Newton for everyone, right? And you never saw a stray sign among a group, right? So even that household didn't disagree, or like say, one member of the family wanted this candidate. You don't see any of that. There was no division. I couldn't find a single lawn where there was a mix, of people.
I think we've got some new numbers for 8 there. Not much change, 58% or 58.8% for Stephen Farrell over Holly Ryan, the incumbent, at 41.2%. I think we might have 2 precincts left to come through.
And I would say Holly Ryan is another one of those candidates who was more nuanced and probably more in the middle of the spectrum than people may have thought she was, and it would be pretty significant. I mean, it was a really big deal when Holly Ryan was elected as the first transgender city councilor or elected official in the state of Massachusetts.
Right.
And right now facing looks like a pretty steep challenge here.
Yeah, I think we have one more to go.
Yeah.
One more precinct as far as I can see. We're slowly getting in those numbers. Obviously, the at-large race is for the entire city to vote for, so those numbers will obviously take a little bit longer. What do you think the turnout will be for tonight? Or I should say today, and the early voting and so on?
It's an off year. In other words, it's no mayor's race.
Right.
You get a lot more people out when there's a mayor's race, definitely. It's all about get out the vote.
Well, so just look at this. So Ward 3-2, is that your old ward?
Mine is 3-1.
So 3-1.
3-2 is the Hill, West Newton.
Okay, so West Newton Hill, there are 1977 voters and only 448 voted. So it's less than 25% for sure.
Yeah.
And the same thing in 2-4, Ward 4, Precinct 2, 2155 voters and 941 voted. That's actually fairly high, probably because it is a contested ward race, and Ward 2 is a place that votes a lot. But so we're seeing, that clearly the turnout is light.
Yeah, I was wondering if it would be over 20% this year.
Right.
No, when I went to vote around 6:30, there was only 450 people who had voted in 3-1. It's usually a lot higher than that. Even in an off-year election, it's usually higher than that. So, but I don't know that included all of the early votes.
I don't know if this, I don't believe this does.
Yeah.
No?
I'm not sure. I'm
I think that
out of the loop on that.
my understanding is
because they could still do it today. They could still
Yeah.
drop off
Oh,
the
yeah.
vote today.
Yeah. But what I mean is, if they haven't put in the early votes yet, then, this could all change one way or
True.
the other, or just get more so.
True.
my recollection from last time with early voting was that
They had
they
it.
put them in during the day. They
They
brought
did-
them over
Okay.
to the precincts and they
So yeah, then
rolled them in,
maybe
but
it-
that may not be the case anymore.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah.
But there are still some votes that have gone
Right.
into the drop boxes up until 8 o'clock. So.
they still can. I guess we're getting some more numbers for Ward 5, or excuse me, Ward 6 are coming in shortly. Getting those numbers up for you. We still have, according to my database here, 2 precincts who have not. But Martha Bixby, so far leading at 54.6% over Lisa Gordon at 45.5%. And this is for the Ward Council Ward, the Ward seat, Ward Councilor seat, who is replacing Brendan Noel.
Right. So that would be one that where if that held, it stayed the same in terms of this analogy I've been using about.
Well, in Ward 5, we have an update here. Andrea Downs has taken the lead since our last notice of this at 35%. Rena Getz is now at 33.2%, and Deb Crossley at 31.8%. And this is for at-large, so this is a citywide one. And we've got Ward 8 coming up shortly. Right about.
Yeah, still nothing from Ward 5, which is odd.
Oh, I've got Ward 5 on here.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
All right, I got to hit
You have to-
refresh.
Yeah, you got to. You have to manually refresh it.
I'm still in
It's
the
a
analog
good chunk of
age.
Ward 2.
Oh, here we go.
Ward
Yeah,
6
okay.
that's out, which is 2 contested races.
Late
Yep.
Dawn's on Marblehead. So.
But this being not a municipal, a mayoral race, makes it a little tougher, obviously, and not in a presidential year too, to get out the votes. Citywide is where I'm thinking that it's going to hurt the most for the aldermen, councilors at large. But we do have an update here for Ward 8. 59.5% for Stephen Farrell over Holly Ryan at 40.5%. I'm not sure if that was the same as
It does
before.
appear that the Ward 8 votes are all in, at least
They're
on
all
that.
in.
If that tally is the same as this tally, but,
I still don't have something for 8-1,
oh, okay.
and I've refreshed it a couple times, but may not be working. But yeah, I'm thinking the citywide votes will be harder for those in certain wards that don't. You go and you have an incumbent, and then okay, I'll vote for so and so. Just go down the list.
If this is holding the way it is, I know you don't like predictions. I love them. If this holds,
I don't like making them. I love hearing you. do them.
and then being wrong.
Yeah.
If this holds, it shows a couple things. Either huge dissatisfaction among voters because repeatedly we're seeing challengers to the status quo being challenged. But I also have to say, there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation in this election campaign, and I think we should all take it seriously. First, it's just horrible what has happened. So the Newton for Everyone PAC, which was the Newton for Everyone group, which is a coalition of which the chamber was a member, but also Engine 6, Affordable Housing, and Green Newton and the clergy all together really formed only to talk about village center zoning, not the election. Then along comes an anonymous group that forms a political action committee and buys Facebook ads and the other
Using
social
that
media
name
ads,
with PAC
using
at the
that
end.
name, but supporting the opposition to the candidates that are doing well tonight. So were there a percentage of voters today who wanted to vote for the pro-development candidates who were fooled or tricked into thinking they were voting for the candidates they wanted by this fraudulent campaign to do that? And we can disagree about issues. We should disagree about them honestly. And this was so dishonest and so disgusting that this group did this and that they went out there. And then literally, if you were on social media, if you Googled, you would find their endorsements under Newton for Everyone and they were
pack.
lies.
Yep.
You know, it was just awful. And I don't know how big a percentage or whether that had an outcome or not, but it's terrible.
It's definitely, discourse has lost its way in that.
Right. We're emulating the worst of our nation's political activities when we do things like that. Shameful.
And just looking at the turnout in the various different wards, obviously the turnout's going to be higher where you have a ward race as well as an at-large race. At least that's what I'm seeing so far. And from the results we're seeing so far, a lot of this seems to be single-issue voting. I mean, I absolutely agree on that. And I agree with you 100%. It's a damn shame that we didn't get to hear more from people about the other stuff outside of whether, you know, they're for it or against it.
And we have really significant challenges in the city that have nothing to do with development and zoning.
So it looks like David Mickley has the 68.7% over Dan Gainier. We still have two. Let's see. I think I still see 2 precincts left here, but that's pretty large difference between the two, and that would be a lot to actually make up with. Well, it's possible. Oh, yep. And some more numbers are coming in there. Slowly but surely, they're coming in.
So this is stunning if this prevails, because there has not been a more dedicated public servant than Deb Crosley in terms of shepherding through these issues that people are most passionate about, but in general, just being there and being the calm and collected during some very heated debates, and really steering something. And if Deb Crosley, after I don't know how many terms, is unseated here, that is stunning, I think.
She's worked extremely hard on this village center
and has been there for years as this person who's been, no one's been more thoughtful, and no one spends more time, again, when we talk about municipal issues, digging into whether it's water and sewer rates or whatever, and really understanding the nuances of these things and helping the public understand it.
And accepting people's opinions and making sure that
and
those opinions are
moderating
heard.
the events and public hearings and staying, those public hearings have been 4 or 5 hours long, and then come back a couple weeks later with more.
Right.
It's just stunning that voters may have turned her out in favor of wanting to see some changes.
I guess we'll see as more of these numbers come in, because we're still missing, well, all of 1 is in, 2 is missing 2, 3 is missing 2. All of 4 is now in. It looks like all of 5 is now in too. 6 is still missing 2. So 7 is in, and we're missing 1 in 8. So we're getting closer to the end. And we've got, this is really close. For at-large, at least right now, 32.9% go to Alicia Bowman, 33.8% go to Vicki Danberg, and Alan Lubovitz has 33.3%. So in this case, Alicia Bowman would be the one to. But this is at-large, so this is still citywide.
Help me if my memory is correct on this, but didn't Alicia Bowman get into office after a recount, a long contest? Was that this last election cycle? It was that close that there was a recount, and it dragged on
memory is
for
better
several
than
weeks.
mine, so yes, you probably.
This is close enough. And again, we're still missing some votes, and we don't know about
We're
early
still missing a
voting and
few.
all that. But this looks like it's close enough that maybe we would see a repeat of that where it comes down.
Most likely. I mean, right there, there's 66 votes, the difference between the two.
Right. So.
That's very possible, and as we get more numbers, they're coming in.
But it certainly tells you folks that your votes count, and it makes a difference. And if you didn't vote today, you may have missed a chance to influence the election one way or the other.
I was asking people today whether or not they voted in their own town, and most of them said no, which was very surprising, considering that the local really affects you the most. Here we have Councilor at Large for Ward 5. Really close between Andrea Downs and Rita Getz, 34.2 to 34.3, and Deb Crossley, as you were saying, at now 31.5. Those numbers are slowly coming in, and for Ward 6, which we were just at.
What are you looking for?
just to see
Yep.
where the zeros are.
Alan Lebovitz seems to be the leading
2223,
Right now.
3334, 6162, and 81.
So we still have
He
some
wants-
pretty significant wards
Yeah.
missing
Yes,
in terms
missing
of
right
how this may swing for some of these races. But and ironically, it looks like we can't call any of the ward races because we're having at least one
Yeah, we're missing at least one, or if not two.
one or two wards in each of the ward contests, and the at-large
Right.
ones depend, of course, on everything.
But yeah, those are the numbers as of right now. The city is obviously putting this in and will let us know. Still on the lead, I believe those, since Ward 2 is still missing two precincts, we are
Yep.
still awaiting those for Ward 4, Ward 6. Let's see, Ward 6, oh no, missing still two. But Stephen Fair, on Ward 8, I think we're missing one, correct?
Correct.
So we're
8-1.
getting there. Yeah, we're getting there. But those are, just in A1, there's possible of 2,004 voters. I don't know exactly how many will show up, but
Right.
it really
Right.
depends because some of those have some very high numbers. For instance, in Ward 6, you've got almost 4,000 votes available,
Right.
or voters available. Whether or not they all show up is, as I say, another thing. But
Yep.
it's we're getting down to the wire, slowly but surely.
Well, I think if anything, in some of these closer races, they're just going to tighten up a little bit
Mm-hmm.
based on the wards that are still out, or the precincts that are still out. So here, I picked the future.
There you go.
did.
Went against.
So noted. Let me write that down.
Oh God, I've been working on my brand for so long.
So the Ward 4 actually is all in.
Yep.
And right now we have Randy Block winning it at 59.2% over Doris Ann Sweet at 40.8%. So you had 1,229 votes over 847. And these are obviously unofficial,
Right.
but
So Randy Block is a guy who worked really hard in that ward and did spend a lot of time. And of course, he's had a long history there because he was involved in organizing against the Riverside development, and so people knew him and he knew his neighbors. And it seems that he really was able to prevail there by really doing old-fashioned shoe leather, going around
going
talking
around
to people.
talking.
Again, I'm still going to come back to though about. I don't think it may have made a difference in this with this wide a margin, but there were a lot of voters who were lied to in the final days of this election, and that may have been part of what we're seeing here.
It's possible.
Yep.
I mean, anything's
Yep.
obviously possible, but yeah.
That's my.
That's yours.
That's why you invited me, right?
That's
That's
right.
your story, and you're sticking to it.
Oh, we're still, my whole thing changed here, but yes, we're missing still the 4 precincts, 2-2, 2-3, 6-2, and 8-1 at the moment. So we're getting those numbers slowly but surely.
So while we're waiting for numbers,
Yes.
So here, I mentioned that I really feel like the loser in this election was the chance to talk about a wide variety of different
Right.
issues because we were only focused on one thing. One of the winners, I have to say, one of the things that's really refreshing and different is that we had 2 independent news sites that covered this election.
Yes.
So the Fig City News and the Newton Beacon, for the first time in a long time, you were a candidate. You could actually get a profile written about you. There was an opportunity to do that. Both groups there, those nonprofit independent sites, would probably be even stronger with a year behind them of experience.
Right.
But they both did a really nice job
Yes.
providing election guidance and giving candidates a chance to talk and be heard. And so, thank goodness we finally have some good independent media back in Newton paying attention to round out what NewTV does, to round out the various debates and things like that. That was a really refreshing change this year.
Yeah, it's great. It's actually great to have them.
Yep.
I
And
love
it's great
reading
to have
both.
2 of them because
Yes.
there was definitely distinct differences in terms of how they approached it. One is an all volunteer run site with people who know the city really, really well. And the other one is a nonprofit with a guy from out of the city who looks in on it. So in one case you get some inside view of reporting, and another one you get an outside view from somebody looking in, and both views are really valuable, especially because you get both views.
Right.
So it was a really nice mix there.
I agree,
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to have them.
Yep.
Too bad, the tab is, as you know, gone. You were there for a long time.
I think some voters do miss that paper that lands in their yard, and that does get people who maybe wouldn't have paid attention to paper. You still have to make that effort to go online to read it.
Right.
But it was a really great start, and both of them are worthy of our eyeballs and of our financial support.
Absolutely. We're still waiting for some more This is at large, so we're still waiting for those 4 precincts to give us their numbers, but I know there's always 1 or 2 that kind of stagger along.
Yeah, it is.
I'll have to remember which ones they are, but I think they're the same ones that we currently see right now.
Yeah, the same ones every year. Stragglers.
Yeah, it's bound to happen.
But I think, so we have all of Ward 4, and we know where that is.
Yep.
We're still missing a 2 and a 6 and an 8.
Yes, so we can't really call
Any of the other ones, yep.
any of them.
Right.
Yeah, because the other ones are at large, and we can't count those because it's not how it's done. Unless you'd like to predict.
My predictions are done for
Yeah.
tonight, so it's up to you, man.
So what do you think we'll be facing coming next year? What are the big issues for next year that are really going to, I mean, schools obviously are a big issue. Funding for the schools, funding for the teachers. I guess money is basically what it all comes down to.
That's the perennial issue.
Right.
That's always going to be the issue. I mean, I saw Rick Lipoff was on earlier talking about Prop 2.5, but ever since Prop 2.5 was passed, it makes it very, very hard for cities and towns to fund things the way that they would really like to fund them without having to go through the expense and the time and effort that goes into doing a ballot question, to do an override or a debt exclusion. And you get more people out for those, but those are generally special elections that aren't held in November.
Right.
So there's single issue elections. Every time that the overrides don't pass, people come back and says, well, why can't we afford to fund this? Why are we losing teachers in these schools? Why? Well, that's why. It's because we didn't pass an override. I know people who don't like taxes or don't like high taxes. Don't like to hear it, but taxes is the price you pay for living in a civilized society.
Yes.
And as Barney Frank used to say, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
That's an interesting way to put it, I guess. You're writing stuff down, Greg. What do you got?
Well, I'm just trying to tally up where we might be, because when you ask what matters next year, it's who is the city council president, right? And it's not the individual, but which political side of our spectrum is the city council president. And it's right now, based on this, it's really, really close. It could be 1 vote margin, which could give one councilor an opportunity to really be a decider and be influential, but it's really close. And what we definitely don't have is a supermajority anymore. So any vote, the big development thing that's not related to housing, anything that requires supermajority, that neither side is going to have that. So those are big issues, no matter what we deal with as a city, no matter what the council deals with. It's going to be very tight in terms of the split of the vote. There'll be those moments when a councilor could, if they choose, swing one way or the other on an issue, and that will make a big difference.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it depends where you sit, right?
I guess so, but
Yeah.
I mean, having that flexibility to, I guess, go either way because you don't have a supermajority.
Right.
I mean,
Well, it isn't just who's the president of the board, it's who gets appointed to the various committee
Correct,
chairs.
right.
And that's how they get the votes, is they go around and they canvass the other members before they have the caucus that happens after the election, where they elect a new president and vice president of the board. And that's how you get your votes, is you offer people, well, if you vote for me, I'll make you chair of finance or make you chair of zoning and planning, or whatever it is the person has a particular interest in. And the committee chairs, that's where the real work gets done, is in the committees.
right.
And if you've got a good chair, or if you've got someone who likes to move things along or is willing to move things along, regardless whether they support a particular item or not, if they're a good committee chair, things will move along. If you get somebody who is more of an obstructionist, then that can be a really problem. And I won't name names, but when I was on the Board of Aldermen and later in the City Council, there were some committee chairs that was their stock and trade, was to
Stop things
it.
from
Yeah,
happening?
it was basically, I'll drag my feet as long as I really need to. We're not going to let this pass. It'll never get out of committee. And there's certain mechanisms you can use, to get things out of the committee. But by and large, if the committee chair doesn't want to move it, it's not going to move.
So let me ask you this, how many years were you on the council, or the alderman?
14.
14. In that time, did you ever see it so divided where you knew 9 in this case are going to vote this way and 15 are going to vote the other way? Or were there different issues where you were in different coalitions and sometimes you were with somebody and the next time you were with somebody else?
More like the latter. I mean, but there were, there were definitely some issues that you knew. And, when it came down to, and I'm thinking about, Riverside and other specific projects.
Right.
Where the ward councilors have more of a vested interest because particularly if it's in their ward, but they're going to get the support from the other ward councilors. The one difference now is for zoning and for special permits, you don't need a 2/3 majority anymore. You just need an absolute majority. So that makes it a little bit easier to get some zoning changes done and get special permits approved. That being said, it was always a lot of different issues, and politics makes strange bedfellows. Yeah, it does. Because I could be absolutely on board with what Emily Norton was doing about anything to do with climate and climate change and sustainability and that sort of stuff. She and I did not see eye to eye on development, on zoning, and a lot of those issues, but we could join on other things. Leaf blowers, plastic bags, things like that. We were both on the same side of those issues. And we didn't let, our differences on the other issues get in the way. I don't know about this particular collection of people, but I've also been on the board where, the feelings ran so deep that, it didn't come to fisticuffs, but I mean, there were very often times, well, it did once, but I mean, it was, where you would have people shouting each other down and you have, just relationships broken or just the whole process broken. That can happen. I'm hoping that doesn't happen with this group, but it'll remain to be seen. And we don't know enough about these people. That's the problem.
That's true too. Do you think that will make a huge difference if people are not willing to move stuff along? And
I think we're in political times where there are political divisions. I want to say one more thing. So we have 3 councilors that are not running that deserve our thanks for serving.
Yes.
So
Absolutely.
Emily Norton and Chris Markowitz and Brendan Noel deserve our thanks for this. And we have 3 councilors that look like they may very well have been voted out of office tonight. And that's Deb Crosley, Alicia Bowman, and Holly Ryan. We don't know that yet.
We don't know that
but
yet.
One of the things that we noticed, I remember with great fanfare a couple years ago, when women had the majority in the city council.
Yes.
For the first time, women actually were in charge. Well, if this prevails, that is no longer the case because Deb Crosley would be replaced by a male, Alicia Bowman would be replaced by a male, Holly Ryan would be replaced by a male, Emily Norton is going to be replaced by a male, for sure, we know that, and Chris Markowitz has been replaced by a male. Suddenly, the dudes are back in charge. I don't know if that's good or not. I'm not so sure it is.
Don't know.
But, it's just another shift here. Women were really the ones that were setting the tone, and I think in some cases set a more congenial tone in a lot of the deliberations. And now we're seeing something that could be a shift, not just in all the other ways, but a much more male-dominated city council.
I can smell the testosterone as we speak.
There you go. Yeah.
I guess we have, well, I know that all of 5 is now in, meaning Ward 5.
Wow.
So we're getting those numbers up for you in just a moment, but we're getting closer to the end. We still have 2-2, 2-3, and 8-1 still missing from our database here, but we are getting closer and finding out if it will be male-dominated or female-dominated, I guess. We'll find out shortly. We'll see if those numbers actually come in, because I think that's just a total of 2, 4, about 5,500 votes possible, or I should say 5,500 voters. So right now we've got Councilor at Large for Ward 5, Deb Crosley at 31.4%, Andrea Downs at 34.4%, and Randa Getz at 34.2%. So Andrea Downs is now leading, I guess, the pack in that one, and Deb Crosley is still down below. And for Councilor at Large Ward 6, Alicia Bowman at 32.8, Vicky Danberg at 33.4, and Alan Lobovitz at 33.7. So he is still reigning in that particular ward, and for Councilor at Large for Ward 6. So as you said, possibly replace Alicia, Alan Lobovitz possibly replacing her.
And we should be able to know now the ward, Ward 4 and Ward.
Let's see, we've got Ward 5, Ward 6, Ward 2, Ward 4, Ward 6, and 8. So the only one that we can really We've
Well,
got
Ward 6 we should
Ward
know
6
now.
we should know.
We should know, which I believe is Martha Bixby prevailing there.
I believe you are correct. We'll get those numbers up for you in a moment. So Ward 6 and Ward 8, we should know the final. As Ward 4, we know is Randy Block. And for Ward 2, we know is David Mickley. Even though well, I shouldn't say we know. Right now, we're still missing two.
It's a pretty large margin to overcome
Yes.
with just roughly half the votes counted.
Right. So if we could pull those numbers back up, we can show, because in Ward 2, for instance, we have 2 precincts that are missing, which total up to about, I don't know, 3,400 voters available. And if you get half of that, if they all went to Dan Gaynor, then it's possible that he could win, even, I guess, 50%. But right now, as you can see, with half of the, I guess, constituency voting at the moment, 68.7 over 31.3.
Yeah, 2-to-1 margin is hard to overcome.
Yes, and as Martha Bixby over Lisa Gordon, all of those numbers are in for Ward 6, and she has
So
won.
Martha Bixby has been elected.
But that was a pretty close
That's
race.
a close one, so
right.
they will definitely have to pay
And
attention to that
Lisa
one.
Gordon has run many, many times before. Lisa Gordon came to politics, as I remember, opposing marijuana dispensaries.
Yep.
That's how she first got involved in it, and she's been trying to run and get on city council for a while, and may need to keep trying.
It's possible,
Yep.
yes. Yeah.
That's
At
what-
least
yeah,
as of this one, she is not the winner in this
Right.
particular case.
But that's only 24 votes to separate them, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, there could be a recount, or if there's some ballots still remaining, it could be different.
Yeah, it could change by, once it's certified, who knows what can happen at that point.
Right.
And the other one we know about is for the Ward 6, yes, we know. For Ward 8, we're still waiting for one more precinct to come in. But yeah, that one's has 2,000 voters, 2,004 voters. Whether or not they all show up is probably unlikely, considering that.
That's a pretty big margin.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
60-40 margin. It's hard to overcome. I mean, there you've got, about 200 votes separating them.
Yep, and that is your winner right there, Randy Block from Ward 4 for Ward Council. And all of those numbers are in. So yes, we're just waiting for one more. But what would you say for Ward 8? I'm guessing you would probably call it. Right, Greg? You like to call it.
Yeah. My decision desk over here. Yeah, I think it looks.
We need John King up at the
There
big
we go.
Steve Kondracki up at the big board,
Exactly,
pressing
right.
on the buttons.
Right. But if we were thinking about those national elections and you think of that, the map they show the Senate,
Yeah.
It's really even in terms of, the blue and the red, or Team Laredo and Team Albright, or however you want to say it, the pro MBTA communities and the anti-MBTA communities, however, or village center. It's so close, it's really down to one vote in terms of who's going to have that. And really, I think it comes down to, actually, let me try to figure out where that is now, because I said that Albright needed to lose 4, and she's lost 4 seats, and she lost at least 3 of them, if I've got this correct.
I believe you do.
So it's really down to one possible race, which would be.
Which would be which one?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Ward 6, and maybe Ward 6 is already decided.
At large?
Yeah, Ward 6 at large, I think we've already decided, right?
We don't have the at large because we're still missing the 3 precincts.
Okay.
But yes, Alan Lebovitz seems to be the leading. So
Right, it does look like Alicia Bowman is 3rd place there.
yes.
So.
Yeah, those are the numbers that we have right now.
Yeah, haven't really changed yet.
But
yeah, we're still missing 3. So.
Martha Bixby held on, so I think it may be, if I've got this right, Team Albright would have still have a majority of 1. But I could be wrong here, because I am the chamber guy, but I'm not necessarily the math perfect guy.
I don't know. You're showing me otherwise. You're doing pretty well.
Well, I remember the year when Scott Lennon first got elected as president of the Board of Aldermen, and it came down to 1 vote. And the person who I thought was in President Baker's camp at the very last minute switched over. And, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
No.
that's their right
the way
to
it
do.
goes, yep.
But right up until then, you know, it was a real surprise that it came down to just one vote. Looks like it's going to be very similar here.
And they will caucus, the new council will caucus in a couple weeks to determine out who is the new president and vice president of the council. So we'll know that in November, and then they would take office and take control in January.
It'll be interesting to see what David Mickley does. You know, Susan Albright is from Ward 2. She's the at-large.
Yep.
And he would be the ward councilor. And you want to try and maintain good relations with the other members of your ward. Not always possible, but that could influence it one way or the other.
Right, and David Mickley was a guy who really talked about needing housing and needing growth and all these things before he became.
He wasn't willing to go quite as far as Dan Gaynor was going.
No, but I mean, in previous elections and previous statements, he was much more supportive of the kinds of ideas that are behind village center
So
zoning.
I think that sort of weighs in favor of him, you know, being part of Team Albright.
Could be.
Just because it's the same ward, but also because I think their priorities are more in line.
Right. But either way, we've lost some, some incumbents are going home unhappy tonight, and some challengers are happy. It's going to be a big difference for our city council and for our city in terms of the conversations and the debate.
Absolutely. Now, who do you think for president? Albright, and you, as you say, Laredo, but do you really think that Laredo would be the one?
I don't know. You know,
obviously you're not on.
He's expressed interest in the past. You know, he did run against Susan Albright in the last 2 times, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, it seems to be that kind of gravitate towards that, and he did the job before, and he seemed to be liking doing it. So we'll see, but if not, there are other like-minded folks in that group that might, you know, prevail. Maybe he can't get the votes, but another person in that group would, so we'll see.
Ted, what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, I think Mark is probably the most likely because he's done it before. He was, I think, chair of the school committee at one time as well.
Yes.
He likes to be the leader. It's great to be the king. So I would anticipate that there are some other people that might very well throw their hats in the ring. I wouldn't expect any of the newbies to do so, but you never know. But you know, David Kalis has been around for a long time.
True.
You've got a number of other folks who've been around. I don't know that anybody on Team Albright is necessarily going to challenge Susan if she decides to run for president again. But that could happen as well. But I mean, I think you've got a number of different people who, you know, I think the longest serving right now is Lenny Gentile. I could be wrong about that.
And Baker?
And, well, yeah, and Lyle Baker. Yeah, that's right.
You know, I did want to mention one thing that we haven't talked about, which is there was a last-minute write-in campaign in Ward 1. This guy, Benny Arpino, was a very last-minute write-in against Maria Greenberg. I see him here, but they don't have any write-in count here.
Oh, they don't have the counts yet.
It's probably not because with early voting, with all the other things and the lateness of it, and Ward being, you know, Nantum voting a little different than Newton Corner, it probably wasn't successful, but it's worth noting. And Arpino was very, very loudly against any of the changes that are part of the village center zoning or whatever. There's no black and white there. He was clearly opposed
He was
to
clear,
it.
yes.
Yep.
He was bananas, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything.
Exactly. Right.
Team Banana.
There you go. But I did notice he's listed here, but we don't know his write-in. So.
Well, it's been an interesting one, especially with those numbers. Even though we still are missing 3 precincts, it's fairly clear. The numbers have shown some will not be returning.
Right.
Which is, I guess,
So now it's the race. Do we find out who wins before Stephen Colbert goes on or not?
We may, but I don't think we'll be on.
Okay, good.
Yes, we will be ending by 10 no matter what
Okay.
tonight because who knows when these numbers will come in. We could be here all night. It's not like the old days where it was paper ballots and you knew you'd have to be until
I was going to stream John over, but that works.
There you go.
That would be fine. But are there any, like, Are there any issues next year that we should really be focusing on in terms of, obviously the village center, that's the zoning is key.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the
hot
issue.
topic
Is going to be the hot topic. It's going to be probably where you're going to get the most friction on the board. On the city council. Chris, the mayor has another 2 years.
Right.
So the mayor pretty much sets the agenda on the budget. But every year, the budget's always an interesting process, particularly when, as is the case every year, there are shortfalls in various different departments. I know that a lot of folks still don't understand why it's so important to fully fund post-retirement benefits, and how it's not just an accounting trick. You really do need to fully fund pension benefits, medical benefits, and so forth. Otherwise you run into a problem where a whole bunch of people retire and you can't pay for it, but also your credit rating goes down if you haven't complied with what's called GAAP, you hear a lot about that in the Trump trial, but it's just generally accepted accounting principles. You want to meet those, comply with those principles to make sure that you fully fund.
And didn't they already plan? Like, they've planned for it, but
I know, and as a matter of fact, that was one of the keystones. I think that Ruth Ann Fuller, the mayor, was originally on the Blue Ribbon Commission and the Citizens Advisory Group that followed that, and that was a big piece of it, was fully funding some of these benefits and other things like that in order well in advance. Because I think 2030, 2035, or whatever the year is that you have to have it fully funded by, she saw that well in advance, and it was very, very difficult to get through. It was even harder to get a lot of people, even members of the city council, to understand what was going on. But you try and talk to parents in the school or teachers who are losing their job about fully funding, and their eyes just glaze over, because it's like we've got a real crisis right now. We're losing teachers, we're losing programs.
Don't want to worry about the future that far.
Well, I mean, I think people look at it, and then there's we don't have the same issue with all the COVID funding coming in. I knew that was really, really controversial with how the mayor was allocating that, and this is one-time money, and she wanted to make sure that she spent it in a prudent, fiscally prudent way, and a lot of people, I think, just wanted to spend that money. And again, it's just a difference of opinion. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it was definitely a big divide, and that's why, I'm really, really surprised that there were no contested school committee races, because it seems like in the schools is where the issue always comes up.
I mean, they have a big issue now between the contract negotiations, trying to move forward.
So I'm saying we're still missing 2 wards in Ward 2. Or
two precincts
in Ward 2.
And I still have one in Ward 8,
And also, the thing when you ask what's next year, I would say do not put away your decision desk, because there's going to be a referendum in the spring, I'm predicting, on village center zoning. So I predict what happens is this current city council, the one that exists now, will vote and approve it. And then people who are unhappy with that plan will have 20 days to collect signatures. They are motivated. We've seen it tonight. They will collect the signatures, and then there'll be a referendum on village center zoning sometime next year. So we could all be sitting here talking about what those results are about. But and the thing is, this is like really big issue, because let's say the voters reject the village center zoning. Remember, the village center zoning includes complying with the state law. Part of village center zoning is that it complies with state law. So if the voters were to reject the village center zoning, in other words, they say we don't want to follow the state law, what does a judge do? Does the judge say, too bad voters, you have to follow the state law? Or does the judge say you have to go back and redo it? Or whatever? And so that doesn't just matter for Newton, that matters for 176 other communities that are going through the same process right now. Right? Does the whole law get thrown out and we lose the opportunity with the biggest housing law in 50 years in terms of trying to grow housing? It's like huge ramifications, where I can tell you that every level of state government will be watching what Newton does. Everybody around the state will be watching what Newton does if there's a referendum, and there will be a referendum, because these folks that are concerned and unhappy about it are ready to do that referendum.
And if, we don't comply with the MBTA Communities Act, there's a likelihood of losing a lot of funding, not just the state funding, but the federal funding for transportation, for doing, I think, something like $250 million that will come in for train stations and upgrading the MBTA. And that's absolutely neat. I mean, I look at, the Auburndale and West Newton and Newtonville, you look at those train stations that were built in, late 19th century, early 20th century. They're really showing their age, and it's not accessible. All of those things could be lost if we don't comply with the MBTA Communities Act. So, I mean, that could have a profound impact. And I know, they can do a referendum on zoning. I think you're right. It's probably still up in the air about what's going to happen with the MBTA Communities Act, and it does affect, most of Eastern.
And the Attorney General has said she will take us to court if we do not comply with the law, us being Newton, right?
Right. My understanding from talking with Rick and Susan is that they will put something forth because the deadline is the end of this year, and then they may change just the zoning in other parts of the centers.
Right, but I think if it's voted on as one piece, the voters only have a choice to vote it down as one piece. I don't think the voters can pick and choose.
And that's the real problem with referenda,
True,
is that you get an up and down vote on something. The importance of the committee work that gets done on a lot of this stuff is dealing with those nuances and dealing with, what's the ramification for that happening? You can't just have a knee-jerk reaction of I'm for it or I'm against it. And you end up having all these unforeseen or, in some cases, totally foreseeable consequences. But people didn't realize that that was what their vote was going to do. It would be a vote, if it is just an up or down vote. Educating people on it and getting people to actually consider their long-term interests is going to be really tough.
And then let's look at one step back at what happened. So the last time we as a city went to the polls, we rejected the override, or at least most of the
part of
the override, right? Here, voters are rejecting part of the zoning plan, it seems, or showing unhappiness with it. It really is showing a kind of shift in the city. I'm not sure what it means yet, but they didn't go along with the mayor last time, and they didn't go along with some of the city councilors this time. So what does that mean where the public and where voters are right now?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer. Someone out there may. Who knows? Well, let's go through those numbers one more. Only one precinct is missing right now.
Oh, good. We don't have to get Sidney Powell and Jenna Allison. Very happy
So all
about
of Ward 2 is now in, which we can find out the final result, obviously, for the Ward 2 councilor, and update the at-large candidates and see who is actually in the lead at the moment.
So it's just Ward 8 won, but
That's still missing.
But I think it was pretty big margin between Holly Ryan and Stephen Farrell.
Yes. So we can take a look because we are close to 10 o'clock. We'll make it. They're going to do it for us. I know it.
Get you home for cold beer.
There you go.
Here we go. We've got some numbers. Let's see. Ward 2. There we go. Updated. So yeah, it looks as though, I think all those numbers are correct. Let's see. Who's good at math real fast? That looks about right.
Yep.
And yes, David Mickley is declared the winner, unofficially, obviously, but with 61.6% of the votes, with 1,782 votes over Dan Gaynor at 1,109 votes at 38.4%. So it looks like David Mickley will be the next ward councilor from Ward 2. Let's take a look now at some other ones, and I'm sure other ones haven't changed, but I know that they're working hard back there. So there's the ward councilor for Ward 4, Randy Block. All of those are in, so he is the winner.
We're missing part of Ward 8, according to what I see.
Yes, we are missing one more.
This is a councilor, ward
Ward
councilor.
4.
Yes, Ward 4 is all in, so
Sorry.
Randy Block wins. For ward councilor for Ward 6, Martha Bixby. Also a very, very close race by 24 votes, so that we'll definitely have to pay attention to because that one's extremely close. But right now she is the winner. Moving on.
Unofficial winner.
Correct, unofficially. These are all unofficial results. at the
I'm
moment.
hedging for you.
I know that the Ward 8 one is next. We're still missing one precinct from Ward 8, but maybe for the, we're still
Yeah,
missing, but
60-40 is awfully hard to overcome.
yeah, so most likely Stephen Farrell will win that one. Can't say for sure, but here we have updated numbers. Andrea Downs is now on the lead, but it looks as though with one precinct missing, that Deb Cressley could very well be out. She received 6,920 votes with 31.5%. Andrea Downs with 34.5%. And Raina Getz with 33.9%. So Andrea Downs obviously will win that one. For Councilor at Large for Ward 6, it looks as though Vicky Danberg takes the lead. Alicia Bowman is very close to, Alan Lubovitz looks as though he has beaten Alicia Bowman with 33.4% over her 33% of the vote.
Yeah, but it's interesting between the Alicia and Alan, it's only like 90 votes.
Right.
Right.
With one precinct still out.
Exactly. Which
But this
has,
is a very, very close. I mean, you see
Yeah.
it's all 33.7,
yeah, it's very close.
33.4.
Right.
Between
I think,
them
I
all.
think it's worth noting, so what seems to, what we saw happen here in Ward 6.
So that was
and-
my one prediction, is that this race would tighten up.
Well, there you
So
go.
I feel
And you were
pretty
right. Good.
Nicely done.
You know, so we see bullet voting having a big play in both wards, the at-large races. Where,
Always does.
Where candidates, one side only focused on one candidate.
So yeah, as we wait for that one, we may just have to go, because that's kind of how it works. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me tonight. It's always great to have
Thank
you.
you.
I'm sure you'll be back in a
Yeah,
couple
thank you,
years.
Jen.
Really appreciate it. No, I love it. Every 2 years.
Every 2 years, come on back, because I like to hear your opinions, and I know that others do too.
Thank you very much, Jen. Appreciate it. And
So
Councilor,
yes,
Pretty sure my wife's asleep, but
well, it is 10 o'clock. So
Yeah.
thank you all for joining us here at NewTV for Decision 2023. The unofficial results are on the city's website at newtonma.gov. We'll see you back here, obviously, in 2 years, unless Greg is right, then perhaps in the spring. But we'll be back definitely for the next municipal election, including the run for mayor. So have a good night, everyone.